Political strategist David Axelrod continues to raise alarms about recent polls that show President Joe Biden losing to Donald Trump next November.
Well, and by continues, we mean since 2019.
Speaking with columnist Maureen Dowd, Axelrod warned the Biden campaign against discounting the numbers, saying, quote, "I hope they don't think the polls are wrong, because they're not." He continued, "I think Biden has a 50-50 shot here, but no better than that. Maybe a little worse. He thinks he can cheat nature here, and it's really risky. They've got a real problem if they are counting on Trump to win it for them. I remember Hillary doing that, too." Yeah, I remember Hillary doing that. I don't think Joe Biden's doing that. But Axelrod should know, as well as anyone, because polls can be wrong. Take the 2012 election, for example, where 1 year before President Obama's re-election victory, a Quinnipiac University survey showed him losing by 4 points to Republican Mitt Romney.
Well, and I mean, Gallup had Romney winning up until election night. Claire, I've said it here, and David Axelrod is my friend. Mika is friends with David Axelrod. I do feel, though, it would be really unfair to our viewers if we didn't tell them the truth about David Axelrod's relationship with Joe Biden. He's never respected him. He's always talked badly about him. He trashed him in 2020. He said he was too old in 2019, said he wasn't going to win in 2020. And so, again, it's okay. That is certainly his business. But to act, I mean, I love Maureen as well. I love everybody. But to act as if David Axelrod criticizing Joe Biden on or off the record is breaking news is laughable. He has been doing it since Joe Biden was in the White House.
Well, and in fairness to Axe, there's a lot of people out there that are doing this. It's not just Axe. And I kind of agree with you that this probably was not worthy of the coverage that Maureen Dowd is giving it. And that polls can be wrong. I know David Axelrod knows that in his bones. I know anybody who's run for office knows that. I do think that it's important, as I said yesterday. I mean, this poll should focus the Biden camp like a laser on those communities where typically, too often, their votes are taken for granted by the Democratic Party. And I think in this era, no vote can be taken for granted. There can be no assumptions made. Just because you're in union doesn't mean you're voting for a Democrat. Just because you're black doesn't mean you're voting for the Democrat. Just because you're Latina doesn't mean you're voting for the Democrat. These are not monolithic communities, and every vote has to be fought for, and every single constituency needs to be addressed in terms of what their real needs are. Now, having said all that, this is a binary choice. And just because approval ratings are low, I think the polling also showed that, both of these guys, Trump and Biden, would lose to a generic person of the other party. So there is real fatigue about anybody who's been in power because the electorate always wants something new. They want change. They want something different. That's why the power of the incumbency has faded so dramatically in the last years, especially at the advent of the Trump era going forward. I mean, look at the idiot football coach. I mean, he got elected senator because he coached Auburn football. He had no idea how government works or how to work with other people in government to achieve real results. He was just a football coach. But people want that now because they are so unhappy with the status quo.
Yeah. I mean, and you look at all those voters that Democrats have taken for granted. Claire, couldn't agree with you more, and add to that young voters as well. But again, Jonathan Lemire, getting to the point that, again, so much was made of this. David Axelrod coming out criticizing Joe Biden. Man, I know, because we knew the players going back well over a decade here. And David Axelrod has always been critical of Joe Biden. And there's always been, and again, that's his business. We all have politicians, He never thought Joe Biden could get elected president. That's fine. I mean, and so I'm not knocking him. That's his business. And there's always been tremendous tension between a lot of people that worked in the Obama White House and Joe Biden. And people close to Biden will be the first to tell you that a lot of the people that worked inside that White House treated him terribly, treated him with absolutely no respect. Those scars can continue. Why do I bring this up? Again, because this was presented as massive news this past weekend, and it's just not. This is second verse, same as first.
Yeah, it's been well chronicled that many in the Obama White House looked down a little bit on Scranton Joe Biden, though they valued what he brought to the ticket. But there wasn't, they did not think that necessarily he was always in the right. And there was some resentment there in the West Wing. And let's also be clear that Joe Biden never got over the idea that Barack Obama, as president, tapped Hillary Clinton to be his sort of successor and not his own vice president in 2016. And the Reverend Al Sharpton, let's go a little further, though. I think there's some, first of all, David Axelrod said something similar just a few weeks prior to a couple of different outlets. So this wasn't even new, what he said to the New York Times in this piece. But there's also, I think, a little bit of bristling from Obama folks that Joe Biden's first 2 years in office was extraordinarily successful, which matches up pretty favorably to what Barack Obama could do as president, though also deemed a very successful one. It was LBJ and FDR that Biden invoked as his spiritual predecessors, not the man for when she was vice president.
And I think a lot of people don't remember or don't want to remember what Obama inherited. I mean, the economy and all, when he came in and what he was able to do to bring the country back. But I know David Axelrod, you should never underestimate what he says. I've known him since he was in New York politics. He's been right more than he's been wrong. But having said that, the polls are what they are. They said the same thing about Biden in 20, and it was wrong.
Yeah.
So I think that we should not underestimate Joe Biden. I think that, if anything, Joe Biden will read this and be inspired. He's the kind of guy that takes every hit as something to drive him more. So in many ways, Axelrod may be helping Joe Biden work out harder in the gym in the morning, because he's the kind of guy that's going to prove you wrong if he can.
Yeah, I mean, I think, first of all, it would be good if it was perhaps put in the realm of reality. I mean, the reality is Joe Biden is proven when it comes to beating Trump, vetted on what it's like to run against Trump. If anyone shouldn't be underestimated, it's Donald Trump. And let us be the first and last to say it. We said it the first time around. We'll say it this time as well. Joe Biden has done it. Who would you put in his place if David Axelrod says he has a 50-50 chance, maybe? Who has more than a 50-50 chance? Name the person. Somebody name one right now. Anybody.
In the Democratic Party.
Yeah, please. I'd like to hear anybody on the panel. Someone name a name that we know has more than a 50-50. There isn't one. David Axelrod. I mean, that's the part I wish he would have written as well, is that, what we need to build is a bench of great candidates. Quite frankly, it'd be great to see that in the Democrat and the Republican Party, where they're real Republicans coming out of the woodwork, standing up for this country. But nobody knows that Donald Trump isn't to be underestimated more than Joe Biden. I mean, he'll tell you that himself.
Yeah, and Claire, again, I just have to repeat it. What we're hearing about Joe Biden from Democrats now, we were hearing in 2019. I have a quote, David Axelrod in 2019 saying Joe Biden was too old to run for president.
Well, yeah, and by the way, he ran and won, and he has done an amazing job and accomplished things in a bipartisan way that really, I think people forget how hard that is to do in this era, how to do real bipartisan policy work. Everywhere you drive, I was out and about yesterday, and everywhere you drive, you see something being built. That is Joe Biden. And that is the infrastructure that he delivered. So I think it's time to start focusing on the positive and get over the fact that we have two old white men running for president. One of them is crazy. The other one is normal. This should not be hard.
It should not.
Yeah, can we put up the David Axelrod quote? This one's actually from 2020. Biden has a big problem. His campaign manager said some time ago they would be viable in 59% of the state, blah, blah, blah. But he is dead broke, and he needs to raise money. It's hard to raise money off an anemic fourth-place finish. He needs to revive himself in New Hampshire, or the firewall that everybody talks about in South Carolina may just not be there for him. David Axelrod in February of 2020.
This is 2020.
The firewall in South Carolina was there for him after, I believe, a fifth-place finish. In New Hampshire, Joe Biden was talking about a firewall. Joe Biden, even though everybody was saying he's too old to run, Joe Biden was right in 2020. And I think the Rev's right now. The more you say it about him, the more you back him into the corner, the madder he gets, and the more determined he is to win. And again, like, who do Democrats have that's going to do better? Like you said, who do Democrats have that are going to fare better against Donald Trump?
I am absolutely certain he would pass that baton handily if he knew the next person could win.